gonna take a lot of love to change the way things are. It's gonna take a lot of love.
So,
We
hello
won't
and welcome to
get
the
too
Caravan,
far.
promoting peace, safety and well-being for every human being on earth. With me, Brent Caldwell.
And me, Kovido.
We're coming to you from Ōtepoti, Dunedin in the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and today is Thursday, the 22nd of February. What are we going to be chatting about today, Kovido?
We'll be talking about what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. We're also going to be talking about the United Nations resolutions, and we'll be talking about the march that we went on last week, and the fact that this week there's not going to be a march, there's going to be a film instead called The 5 Broken Cameras.
And then maybe we might round it off with some reflections you've made on the First Buddhist Precept.
The first precept, and also one of the, which is very similar to the 10 Commandments, one of the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
The one about killing other people.
Okay, well, let's get into it. So I guess the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to do a wee bit of follow-up, and top of the agenda, I guess, is after 130 days,
Yes.
New Zealand has finally stepped up to the plate,
Yeah.
holding the hands of other nations, but
Canada and Australia
and it's called for a ceasefire.
call for a ceasefire, which is it's wonderful, and it's just you wonder how's it taken us that long. It's very sad, but anyhow, it's a step in the right direction. What we can see is actually all the things that we're doing, all the people marching, all the people writing letters, is actually having an effect.
Yeah, and a new government is probably about establishing its relationships with its international friends and making sure it doesn't tread on anyone's corns. But I still have to say, from a personal perspective, I'm really disappointed that our current government has waited so long and almost 30,000 deaths in Gaza.
And nearly 70,000 people injured.
Yeah.
Which is huge. If you think about that, like in Dunedin, we have something about 120,000 people, so that would be 5 out of every 6 people you know would be either dead or seriously injured.
Yeah, it's hard to take in. However, I guess, whatever the machinations of the government are, at least they've done something, which is a good start.
Yeah.
Speaking of nations taking action,
Yeah.
there was a wee bit of activity in the UN this week.
The UN, yes. Algeria put forward another motion. I think it might be the 3rd resolution to.
Yeah.
Probably it's about the 6th, I would think, but I think it might be actually be the 3rd official one, which went to the Security Council, that there should be a permanent ceasefire. And of course, 13 countries voted in favour of a ceasefire. England managed to abstain, which is good. That's a step in the right direction. But of course, the US put a veto to it, which is, I don't understand the US anyhow.
My understanding is the reason they put their veto in is because they said it would compromise talks that are being undertaken with the US, Israel, Hamas and Qatar for a temporary ceasefire and the allowing of aid to get into Gaza on scale. And I guess by saying on scale, they're talking about not just having 100 trucks go in, but having enough supplies drop in so that every man, woman and child who is currently experiencing those deprivations due to the war would be able to be resourced. And that sounds very noble, but a temporary ceasefire, it sounds kind of like, well, we'll feed you, we'll clothe you, we'll give you what you need, and then we'll continue killing you.
Yeah.
That's what I hear when I hear temporary ceasefire.
So US actually wanted to bring another draft resolution, which would, as you said, give us temporary ceasefire and allow humanitarian aid in. Because at the moment, I think, as you remember, our friend Ruler said, just on water alone, wasn't it,
in the occupied territories.
In the occupied territories. In the West Bank, I think they got 40 litres opposed to 125 litres, and in Gaza they're lucky to get 3 litres per person per day, and probably they don't get that at the moment because there's 1.2 million people in the Rafah, in the refugee camp, which somebody said is the size of Heathrow Airport. Yeah,
and if you think of people just being corralled into a small, tiny area, it's just a recipe for disaster. So
and they're bombing them. They said I think yesterday there was 300 people were killed. I'm not sure if that was by bombing and sniper shooting. Plus they also use drones to go ahead and shoot.
Yeah.
Presumably, well, no, I can't say presumably because it could be anybody.
Suffice it to say, the situation after 130 days is no better off than it was back then. So,
12,000 children, over 12,000 children have been killed. You know.
So last Saturday saw yet another march through the streets of Dunedin from the Museum Reserve to the Octagon. Did you have any reflections on the march?
I think it's good. It's still happening. You know, there are still lots of people coming out, and the bit that stood out for me, well, actually two things stood out. One was as we were marching past McDonald's, there was a chant to boycott McDonald's because McDonald's has been providing free food to the IDF soldiers. I'm not sure in the West Bank or in Israel or as a whole, or I don't know.
And is that part of the BDS that Ruler had talked about?
Yeah, there's a thing called BDS, which is boycott. Boycott something and something else.
Let me just Google that while you're struggling. Anyhow,
yes, she was saying that with South Africa, one of the things that happened when there was a campaign against South Africa was one of the things that was strongest was an economic boycott.
Yeah.
And so, as individuals, we can do our part by not buying things that are produced by Israel.
And if I think of McDonald's, I think I've mentioned this previously, you know, once the war in Ukraine got underway, most of the McDonald's outlets in Russia were closed almost automatically.
Yeah.
So almost overnight. And BDS, for those of you who haven't figured it out already, is Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, a movement to end international support for Israel's oppression of Palestinians.
Right.
And then we just got a wee bit further down the street and Starbucks came in for some attention as well.
Yes, I'm not quite sure what Starbucks did, but anyhow, if you look at BDS, you can see a whole list of companies and products that come from Israel. And as she said, unfortunately, most people only work when economic things hit them.
And it's funny you say that because I was listening to the news this morning and I see Britain has frozen the assets of key leaders of the prison system in Russia after the death of Mr. Navalny in prison the other day. Now that's happened within 48 hours of that news.
Yeah.
So these are things that can be done straight away.
Yeah.
But as usual, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and political manoeuvring in the background, which to the man in the street like me seems rather curious, and you've got to wonder what's at stake. But I guess it goes back to our own ceasefire. I'm sure Chris Luxon does not want to see children dying in Gaza and is just weighing up his options, but it just seemed to take so long.
The other part that came out was Rula. There's this. She's the lady who spoke a few weeks ago, and she said her family, the area they're in, the whole place has been bombed and everything. But by some miracle, the parents' house is still standing. she says, it's kind of held up by strings. That's what it looks like. And her cousin, whose house had been destroyed, sent a picture of her in there with her children. And what they were doing was they were reading books, they were learning to read. So it's like, even amidst this horrendous, they might only be having one meal a day, incredibly little water, there's still that resilience. And Rula talked about the resilience that the Palestinians have, And I think she said that outside in the whole world, there's something like 18 million Palestinians altogether, most of whom are refugees from the various incursions by Israel since 1948.
And just you mentioning that reminded me that when Rula was talking about her father, who was born in a tent as a result of his family being expelled from Palestine in 1948, she talked about her family, and they're all highly successful people, academically, professionally, and despite all those privations and all those different things happening, they've managed to get on. It just gives you some indication of the strength of the human spirit when it's under such extreme circumstances. And I just shake my head at their ability to do that.
And I think people say, what's the point of doing these things like marches? Well, one is, I think, because people are marching all around the world, and as Robert Patman said, in the USA, 60% of the young people are actually against what's happening in Israel. And this is starting to get, New Zealand's doing something, Australia's doing something, Canada's doing something. I think that's happening. But I think the other thing that's really important is that in going on these marches, we actually give support to the Palestinian people who are here, who are in absolute despair. Their relatives have been killed. They don't know what's going to happen today, if there's going to be a call saying yet another relative's killed or wounded or maimed or blinded, or imprisoned. Part of the resolution that the US put forward is to have the exchange of prisoners. Well, hostages, as I think we mentioned before, when Hamas went into Israel and took people away, they called them hostages. And I think there's 115 left in Gaza. But since October 2nd, Israel's gone in the West Bank alone, has what they call arrested 3,500 people. They went into their houses forcibly. They've also killed another 350 to 400 people in the West Bank. But these people are not called hostages. When we looked it up, the only mention you get of hostages of exchange really is the Jewish hostages, and I don't condone what Hamas did with the hostages, but this way of unequal viewing of the word.
Yeah, and I guess this always comes back to this old chestnut of, who is sharing the information and how is it, what is the best way? And as Rula had said, you've only got to take a stroll on Instagram to see people who are uploading real-time footage of what's happening there, rather than being filtered through Google. If you search Google for hostages, the only thing you see is the Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
That's probably no accident. That algorithm will be designed to throw that straight up. And again, it's probably the language we're using. Israel wouldn't call the people they've arrested hostages. They'd just call them prisoners of war, or military.
I don't think you can call them prisoners of war.
Yeah, political detainees, or who knows.
Yeah.
Now, I understand there's going to be no march in Dunedin this week.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there's going to be marches everywhere else in New Zealand. But this week in Dunedin, instead, they're showing a film called 5 Broken Cameras, which I actually saw maybe 10 years ago when I think the person who filmed it came to New Zealand, and there was a showing probably all around New Zealand.
And this is the story of a man who lived in Gaza who is a self-trained photographer and videographer who got his first camera to basically document the life of his firstborn child, but inadvertently became a historian of the events that were happening in Gaza and in terms of Israeli settlements being established.
Yeah, and you know what happens when there's a demonstration by Palestinians and the what's the word? What the Israeli forces do.
So we'll put a link to that film on our Facebook page, and we'll probably run it on the bottom of this recording as well.
And that film will be showing at 2 p.m. at the All Saints Church in North Dunedin.
Okay, All Saints Church, 2 p.m. this Saturday instead of the march.
All Saints Church is opposite the big rugby ground in the middle of the one-way system.
Okay. Okay, so you were reflecting this week about, in your time as a Buddhist monk, about how one of your teachers had said, if all humankind could adhere to just the first precept, the world would be a better place to be. So can you maybe tell us about that, and then talk a wee bit about that precept and how it seems to be common across most, nearly all religions?
Well, this in Buddhism is what's called the 5 precepts, and the first one is to refrain from killing living beings. So my teacher Ajahn Sumedho, who's an American monk who trained in Thailand, I remember him talking, saying, what a difference it would make to the world if we were all able to keep this one precept. Now, at the time, I was a young, enthusiastic monk, and as a monk, you keep 237 precepts. So I remember thinking, just one precept, surely we can manage better than that. We can keep 237, and our precepts included to the extent of not killing flies or mosquitoes. So it was any living being. But now looking back, where I'm probably more like the age my abbot was when he gave the talk, I realise, wouldn't it, if people could just do that, what a difference it would make in this world. What a huge difference it would make. And as you say, when you reflect on other religions, pretty much every religion has somewhere in its basic founding documents something about not killing people. So, for instance, the Christian religion, the Jewish religion, and the Muslim religion all go back to the Old Testament, and so they all go back to the 10 Commandments. And one of the 10 Commandments says, "Thou shalt not kill." And I imagine it's fairly similar in most other religions, but for that I'm not totally sure.
I'm not an expert on religion, but it does seem pretty basic. And I guess the other thing is that, killing is enshrined in law. It's completely illegal, and the sanctions that we have in our own society for the taking of life are quite strong. But it seems to go out the window when it comes to matters of conflict.
It seems to go out the window when, for some reason, either greed or power, we decide that other people actually are, or the powers that be decide other people are not actually like us. There's something different, and it's okay to kill them, or it's okay to kill them in certain circumstances. So, for instance, we were looking about the thing called terra nullis, which was a resolution brought forward by the Vatican in 1095 I'm just reading it here, 1454 and 1493, which granted dominion over terra nullis, that's empty lands, through the right to invade, quote, infidel territories and perpetually subjugate soulless peoples.
Yeah, so, and we've got an article here that says it was on March the 30th last year that the Vatican issued a statement repudiating that document of discovery. Finally.
That's Pope Francis, who we have to say has also spoken out very strongly about the Gaza conflict.
Yeah, big ups to the Pope for that.
Yeah.
So to come back to the idea of the precept.
Yeah, well, I was going to do one other thing. Was last year I did some studies, and one of the things that they said was, as a result of that, the Spanish particularly, and the Portuguese, probably all the other nations too, went to South America. And I think in Hispaniola, which I think is modern day Haiti and Puerto Rico, I might have got that wrong, there were 3 million inhabitants and there were only a few thousand after 100 years or something. It was just this idea that these people they're not human.
Yeah.
Sometimes they gave them the choice, convert or die. I think this may have been common to both Christian and Muslim things. So
what we're really saying is that in civilizations as they evolved, I mean, we pride ourselves, I guess, that we live in a time when we're quite reasonable, when we adhere to what we call a Bill of Human Rights.
We're civilized.
We would consider ourselves to be civilized. And we can look back in history and say, how is that possible? That's terrible. I wonder how we'll be judged in the years to come about standing by and watching thousands of people drown in the Mediterranean every year trying to escape environmental and political upheaval. How we'll document how we've treated people in the Middle East, how we've gone to war for resources. Because those precepts, they date back thousands of years.
Yeah.
And, if you were to speak to any Christians around the world about the Ten Commandments, they know exactly what they are.
Yeah.
But like many things, people would probably say, well, perhaps they're aspirational. Wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice? I guess it is. There's that thing, war will stop when men cease to fight.
Yeah.
Which is and I guess it comes back to the thing we were talking about before, that actually, as men, we seem to be almost unable to do that, or a lot of us unable to do that, to actually not seek revenge, not to go for our own personal gains and subjugate other people, exploit them, and if they don't agree, kill them.
Well, I guess, I'm no psychologist, and I'm certainly no anthropologist, but I'm sure we could probably draw some very long bows and make some guesses as to why the human civilization is living the way it is. But to bring it back to the present, here we are in New Zealand, and we're talking about the actions that are taking place not only in Gaza, but in the Ukraine and in the southern Sudan and all of these places, where our aim is that we want all human beings to have peace and safety and well-being. And I don't think it's asking a lot.
No. And if you think about it, the enormous amounts of money that are spent on arms, the USA is some huge amount. I can't even remember how much it is. It's enormous. If that money was actually spent on helping people with water, growing food, reforestry, because as you say, a lot of the refugees going across in boats are not actually from war, they're actually from the environment, because they haven't been, we've just exploited these places, cut down the forest. When you cut down the forest, all the goodness is actually in the trees, so you end up with a desert. Well, you can grow, maybe you can grow palm oil trees for 10 years, or you can put your hamburger beef cows on them. But it only lasts that amount. And we know this. We've known this we've known it forever, but we've known it particularly in the last 50 years. I knew it.
It's funny, I was watching a National Geographic film about ancient Greece, and they were talking about one of the reasons they came to prominence and had such, speaking of sentient beings, we were joined by a fly, how they established their power was through olive oil.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how many generations it takes to get a viable olive oil plantation running.
Yeah.
And that put me in mind of what Rula had said about all the olive trees that have been destroyed in Gaza. And I guess that's the other sorrow that is ahead in the future for that area, is that a lot of those economic resources that they're hoping that they can rebuild with, will take years to re-establish. Something I've just been thinking about while you've been talking about that terra nullius is that it's wonderful that Pope Francis had rescinded that document of discovery last year, but the world is still dealing with the fallout from those actions.
Yeah, they are. I mean, because initially maybe it was the Spanish and the Portuguese, the Spanish Inquisition, but also the other European nations went on board. So England, Holland, Germany, France,
Belgium. Yeah.
All have been colonial countries, and like America. Huge colonisation there. I was thinking it was slightly ironic that Thanksgiving Day is actually a thing to thank the Indians for supporting the initial settlers who would have died without their support. Yet, in the last 400 years, the Native American Indian population has been decimated. And similarly in Australia, where until 1967 Aboriginal people were classified as flora or fauna, and they were game. Basically, people would go out and shoot them, which is horrendous.
And there's the entire stolen generations situation.
Yeah.
But as I was reflecting, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Our own country's got its own situations to deal with. We often get a bit haughty about our friends across the ditch and the way they treated the Aborigines, but we probably need to get our house in order in terms of some of the things that are still going on, and one can only think of some of the more recent legislation changes that our new government is trying to put through, which seem deliberately targeted at our Indigenous people, the tangata Māori. So, yeah.
It's an ongoing battle, isn't it? Just to fight for basic rights of people and, to give people, there's an equal chance, equal opportunity, but also recognising, with the Aborigines, they've been around, 40,000 years or something, have this amazing culture, but because it wasn't, probably because they weren't white, to be honest, that's probably the thing that generally segregates, because they weren't white and they look different. They could go, oh, these people are not, they're not, and they're not Christian. They don't believe in our God. They do have a wonderful belief, beautiful religious system.
So there's more work for mankind to do, and hopefully anyone watching this might think of something that they can do to show support for the people of Gaza by marching, or if you're in Dunedin this weekend, you might attend the film 5 Cameras, or 5 Broken Cameras, which is at All Saints Church on Saturday at 2 p.m, or email your MPs. Just keep that kind of pressure up.
And also, as Brent said earlier, we're not just thinking about Gaza and Israel, so it may be that you have more affinity with what's happening in the Ukraine or the Sudan or Burma or the Congo, or maybe it's to do with the elephants being destroyed, so rich Chinese can make things out of their tusks,
Humankind is still evolving, And unfortunately, change is going to take time, and it may not be in our time, but there are things that we can do. Never underestimate the ripple effect of an act of kindness or an act of support, or standing beside someone who is experiencing tough times. But that's about it for this week. So from me, Brent Caldwell.
And from me, Kovido.
May you be well, may you be happy, may you live with ease.
And may all be filled with peace.
It's gonna take a lot of love to change the way things are. It's gonna take a lot of love, or we won't get too far. So if you look in